the first time I noticed something was wrong with the creek. The morning air was still cool, carrying the smell of wet moss and fresh spring earth. Millstone Ridge looked perfect at first glance. The dew glittered on the trimmed lawns, the houses shone with fresh paint, and the cul-de-sac was quiet except for a dog barking down the street. But something felt wrong as soon as I stepped down the slope behind our yard. The ground was soft under my boots, but the sound was missing, the gentle trickle of water I'd listened to for years. It was replaced by something faint and ugly, like liquid straining through gravel. When I pushed through the brush and saw it, my heart fell. The creek, our creek, was gone. In its place lay a scar of poured concrete, jagged and gray, running 50 yards down. The water that once danced over mossy stones now seeped sluggishly under slabs, cloudy and choking. Roots had been cut away. The banks looked butchered, raw earth crumbling into unnatural angles. I crouched down, pressing my hand against the cold surface. The rough grit bit into my palm. This wasn't erosion control. It wasn't beautification. It was a death sentence. I closed my eyes and pictured Maggie as a little girl, her toes splashing, mason jar in hand, squealing with laughter when she caught a tadpole. That memory felt violated now, smothered under cement. I felt my jaw clench, my stomach twist. The HOA had finally gone too far. Morning, a voice called. I turned, and there was Carl, my neighbor of 20 years, trudging down the slope in his scuffed leather boots. His red and black flannel flapped in the breeze, Vietnam vet cap shadowing his wrinkled face. He raised his mug, steam curling into the cool air. "You see this mess?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it. He took one long look at the destroyed creek, then slowly shook his head. "Son of a bitch. They actually did it." "Did what?" "HOA's little beautification project," Carl muttered. Heard him jawing about it at the last meeting. Said the creek was an erosion hazard. Figured they'd fix it with concrete. He spat the word like poison. I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Fix? This isn't a fix, it's a goddamn grave." Carl sipped his coffee, eyes narrowing on the gray scar. "Told them it was a bad idea. I've been here 30 years. That creek floods a little every spring, sure, but the ground drinks it up. That's how it works. You block water, you get trouble." My anger burned hotter. Emma's going to lose her mind when she sees this. Carl snorted. "Davenport doesn't care about creeks. She cares about looking good in the HOA newsletter. I hope she likes the look of water in her basement." By the time I trudged back to the house, Emma was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed over her red hoodie. She didn't need me to say a word. She read my face instantly. "It's as bad as Carl said, isn't it?" she asked, her brown ponytail swaying as she tilted her head. "Worse," I admitted. She pressed her palms to her temples, exhaling hard. "I told them last year. Concrete doesn't belong in a creek. But no, Mrs. Davenport and her landscaping committee think everything natural is messy." Her voice trembled, and I knew it wasn't just anger. That creek was her sanctuary after endless 12-hour shifts at the hospital. She'd curl up by the oak tree, listening to frogs, watching the water soothe her tired nerves. Now it was gone. I stepped onto the porch, reached for her hand. "We'll fight them. This isn't the end of it." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "No, it's the beginning. Nature's not going to let this slide." That night we returned, flashlights in hand. The beams cut across the mutilated creek. Water pooled strangely, trapped between the slabs, bubbling like a clogged drain. The banks looked wrong, stripped bare, roots severed like tendons. Emma crouched, the beam from her flashlight shaking slightly in her grip. "Look at it. The water doesn't know where to go. It'll find a way," I muttered, my stomach sinking. Water always does. The night was silent except for the unsettling sound of trapped water, gurgling as if it were trying to breathe. A thin fog rolled across the banks, glowing ghostly in the flashlight beams. For the first time since moving here, I felt fear in my own backyard. 2 days later, the storm came. Thunder rolled over the ridge, rain pounding the rooftops like 1,000 fists. From the sliding glass door, I saw the slope turn into a funnel, water racing down toward the ruined creek. But it didn't flow. It slammed against the concrete, foaming and rising fast. Within minutes, Carl's vegetable garden vanished under swirling brown water. His shed stood in 3 inches, the current licking higher. Carl waded through the mess, flashlight beam cutting through sheets of rain. His flannel clung to him, cap dripping. He shouted something, but the roar drowned it out. Emma gripped my arm, eyes wide. "It's flooding," she cried. And it wasn't just Carl's place. Across the way, Davenport's manicured lawn was a swamp, water creeping up her stone steps. The community room reeked of wet carpet and mildew. Neighbors crowded in, damp from battling water in their basements. Mrs. Davenport stood at the front, beige blazer spotless, pearl necklace gleaming, chin lifted as if she were untouchable. "This was unforeseen," she said firmly. "The project was designed to preserve property values." Carl barked from the back, voice hoarse. "Lady, I've got a floodplain where my tomatoes used to be." Shouts rose. Another neighbor yelled, "My basement's swimming." Emma shot to her feet, fire in her eyes. "You destroyed the creek. You blocked its path, and now the water is destroying us." Davenport's lips tightened. "We had experts consult." I cut in, voice shaking with rage. "What experts? The guy who owns the cement truck?" The room erupted in angry agreement. For once, everyone stood together. But Davenport only smoothed her blazer and promised mitigation measures. That word felt hollow. Outside, the rain kept coming, and the creek, our creek, was gone. But something worse was taking its place. The morning after the flood, the neighborhood looked like a war zone. Mud streaked across driveways, flower beds were half buried in silt, and soggy piles of ruined mulch floated in standing puddles. The creek had risen high in the night, carving its own twisted detours across lawns before retreating again, leaving behind a swampy mess. I stood with Emma at the edge of our yard, hands on my hips, staring at what used to be our safe little creek. It had become something unrecognizable, angry, swollen, its natural rhythm destroyed. The concrete slabs stuck out like bones from a wound. Carl was already working, grunting as he hauled a sandbag toward his shed. His flannel was rolled up to his elbows, his jeans smeared with mud. He caught my eye and yelled, "Next storm, it'll be worse. This ain't over." Emma hugged herself tighter, eyes scanning the soaked neighborhood. "It feels dangerous now, like we're living next to a bomb waiting to go off." I didn't argue, because deep down, I felt the same. By mid-morning, the cul-de-sac was buzzing with angry voices. Neighbors trudged through puddles and rubber boots, assessing damage. Mrs. Carter held up a broken garden gnome, her yellow raincoat streaked with mud. "This cost me $100, she wailed, then gestured toward her half-drowned flower bed. "And look at this, gone, all of it." "Forget flowers," Mr. Johnson barked, holding a piece of soaked carpet. "My basement looks like a swimming pool. I had to shut off the breaker before the water hit the outlets." Emma and I exchanged a look. The frustration in their voices wasn't just about ruined gardens. It was fear. If this had happened after one storm, what would spring bring? Carl pushed through the group, his voice booming. "Told you folks, we've been living fine with that creek for decades. Soon as they dumped concrete in it, we got a problem." The crowd turned, all eyes settling on me when Emma added sharply, "And you know who signed off on it, Davenport and her board." The anger shifted then, like storm clouds forming over the HOA itself. Later that afternoon, Emma and I knocked on Davenport's pristine front door. She ushered us in with her usual icy politeness, as if the world outside wasn't drowning. Her living room smelled faintly of lavender polish. Everything was neat, untouched, almost sterile. "Mrs. Davenport," I started, forcing calm into my voice. "You need to see what's happening outside. The creek is flooding because of that concrete." She waved a hand dismissively, adjusting her clipboard. "Exaggeration. Temporary pooling is expected after any landscaping project." Emma leaned forward on the chair's edge, her voice tight. "Temporary pooling? My neighbor's basement has 2 feet of water. Carl's shed nearly washed away. This isn't landscaping, it's sabotage." Davenport pursed her lips. "We had engineers consult." "No, you didn't." I cut her off. "You hired a contractor with a cement truck and called it expert advice." Her eyes flashed, but she held her ground. Property values require decisive action. The creek was eroding. The board did what was necessary. I felt my fists clench. Property values. That was all she cared about. Numbers on paper, not the homes already under siege. We didn't have to wait long for Davenport's lies to unravel. 2 days later, black clouds rolled in again. By dinner, the sky cracked open, lightning slicing through the ridge, rain hammering rooftops like war drums. Emma and I stood on the back porch, helpless, watching the slope behind our house funnel another torrent toward the concrete trap. Carl was already out there, flannel plastered to his back, frantically stacking sandbags around his shed. "This is going to break something," Emma whispered, gripping the porch rail so tight her knuckles turned white. The creek didn't absorb the storm, it rejected it. The water hit the slabs, churned, and surged sideways, spilling into yards like an invading army. I felt the boards under my boots vibrate as the roar grew louder. The storm hit harder than the last. Within minutes, Davenport's Hill, once the jewel of Millstone Ridge, was a swamp. Her carefully mulched beds ripped apart, flowers swirling away like debris. Water rushed up her polished stone steps, rising fast. Through the flashes of lightning, I saw her, Davenport herself, on her front porch, phone pressed to her ear, shrieking for help that wasn't coming. Her blazer clung to her shoulders, pearls swinging wildly as she pointed at the flood like someone could order it to stop. Emma stepped closer to me, shaking her head. She thought she could control nature with concrete. Now nature's coming for her. I didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. The water was speaking loud enough for all of us. The storm never slowed. It grew angrier as midnight rolled in. Water pounded the ground with the force of fists, and the neighborhood became unrecognizable. Driveways were rivers, lawns looked like lakes, and the creek had lost its banks entirely, a roaring brown serpent slashing through our lives. "Here," Carl shouted over the storm, pointing with his shovel. "Pile the sandbags here, or we'll lose the Johnson's wall." Emma stumbled in the mud, clutching a sandbag almost as heavy as she was. I dropped my flashlight beam onto her path, lunging forward to grab her elbow. The current was tugging at everything: trash cans, toys, even the edge of the Johnson's wooden fence, which groaned before tearing away. "I can't hold it," Emma gasped, dropping the bag with a splash. "You don't have to," I yelled, slamming mine down in its place. Carl was beside us in an instant, muscles straining as he shoved the heavy bags into a makeshift barrier. The water rose anyway, slapping against our knees, uncaring, relentless. For a split second, I thought, we might actually lose this whole place tonight. A shriek cut through the storm. Davenport. She was on her porch, pearls bouncing as her chest heaved, phone still pressed to her ear, though everyone knew no help was coming fast enough in weather like this. "You need to fix this," she screamed at us, voice cracking. "Do something, for God's sake. This is your fault. You stirred people up against the HOA." I stared up at her, rain dripping into my eyes, fury boiling in my chest. "Our fault. You filled the creek with concrete. You turned a living thing into a gutter, and now it's spitting it back at you." Her eyes darted from me to the water clawing at her steps. "Then fix it," she howled. Emma stepped forward, voice sharp as lightning. "You wanted control, Davenport. How's that working out for you?" Behind her, the first line of water slithered across her pristine marble floor. Davenport spun around, frozen by the sight of her empire falling apart. A crack like thunder, but it wasn't thunder. It was the sound of 2 cars being ripped from driveways. Headlights cut sickly yellow beams under the water as sedans bobbed like toys, drifting sideways into the cul-de-sac. "Move. Get away from the street," Carl roared, waving his shovel like a madman, herding neighbors toward the hill. Emma and I latched onto a wooden mailbox, the current dragging at our legs. The ground beneath us vibrated with the roar of water. Across the way, Mr. Johnson was screaming for his dog, the poor animal barking from a second-floor window. "This isn't a storm anymore," Emma whispered, terror in her voice. "It's a disaster." She was right. Millstone Ridge wasn't just wet, it was drowning. And every second we stayed, we risked going down with it. Then it happened. The creek groaned, An awful, grinding sound that cut through the rain. Cracks shot like spider webs across the slabs. Emma clutched my arm, eyes wide. And then the whole thing gave way. Concrete slabs tilted and crashed, swallowed by the raging torrent they were supposed to control. The water roared with newfound freedom, blasting sideways into yards, smashing through fences. A slab the size of a pickup truck slammed into Mrs. Carter's shed, exploding it in a burst of splinters. "Oh my God," Emma whispered. Carl just shook his head, rain running down his lined face. "Told you. Can't cage a creek. It'll find its way." I couldn't speak. Watching that collapse was like watching the neighborhood's last defense crumble. We weren't fighting water anymore. We were surviving it. Out of the chaos, something shifted. When Mrs. Carter's father was nearly swept away, the neighbors didn't wait for the HOA, didn't wait for orders. We formed a human chain, one hand locked to the next, braced against the river tearing through our own street. I was at the front, my boots barely holding against the pole. Emma was behind me, teeth gritted, hair plastered to her face as she pulled with everything she had. Carl anchored the rear, bellowing, "Hold steady. Don't let go." The old man's terrified face appeared out of the black water, hands flailing until I grabbed his wrist. Together, we hauled him towards safety, inch by inch, against the storm that wanted to claim him. When we finally dragged him onto higher ground, neighbors collapsed in the mud, sobbing, laughing, trembling with relief. For one fleeting second, it wasn't about Davenport or the HOA or property values. It was about us, surviving together. When dawn finally came, it looked nothing like hope. The storm had passed, leaving silence so heavy it pressed against my ears. Millstone Ridge was unrecognizable. Yards were swamps, fences lay flat in the mud, and driveways were strewn with everything the water had carried: trash cans, bicycles, even someone's leather recliner. I trudged through the mess, my boots squelching, muscles aching like I'd been in a prize fight. Emma stayed close, her hoodie torn at the elbow, face pale but determined. Carl leaned on his shovel nearby, eyes scanning the wreckage with the weary acceptance of a man who'd seen battle before. "This place'll never be the same," he muttered. He was right. But standing there, ankle deep in mud, I felt something else, something stronger than despair. We'd faced hell together, and Davenport couldn't deny what had happened anymore. By noon, we gathered at the HOA office. Davenport sat behind the desk, looking nothing like the queen of Millstone Ridge. Her pearls hung broken, her blazer wrinkled, hair wild from the night before. Papers were scattered across her desk like the storm had passed through here too. "You can't pin this on me," she said weakly, though her voice lacked the bite it once carried. "It was the contractor. The rain was worse than forecast. No one could have known." I slammed my hand on the desk. "We told you. We warned you. And you silenced us. People nearly died last night, Davenport. Their homes are wrecked. That blood is on your hands." Emma crossed her arms, eyes hard. "Property values, remember? That's all you cared about. Well, congratulations. Now they're worthless." Carl leaned in the doorway, silent but steady, his presence alone like a verdict. For the first time, Davenport looked small, powerless, broken. In the days that followed, something remarkable happened. The HOA, once the iron fist of Millstone Ridge, vanished into the background. Davenport avoided everyone, retreating into her half-ruined mansion. The rest of us? We rolled up our sleeves and went to work. Carl and I lifted fence posts, our backs screaming but spirits oddly light. Emma worked with Mrs. Carter, replanting what little could be salvaged from the flower beds. Children splashed through puddles, rescuing toys from the mud, their laughter carrying through the cul-de-sac like music. For the first time since moving here, I saw Millstone Ridge not as a collection of houses, but as a community. Not because of the HOA, but in spite of it. We were rebuilding not just fences, but trust. One evening, as twilight painted the ridge in soft purple, I saw her. Davenport stood in front of her ruined home. No pearls, no blazer, just a plain gray sweater, clutching a half-empty glass of wine. She stared out over what was once her empire. Flower beds gone, lawn a swamp, steps cracked. Behind her, The neighborhood glowed with porch lights. Laughter and hammering echoed as neighbors worked side by side, piecing life back together. But Davenport didn't join. She just stood there, staring alone. And for the first time, I almost pitied her. Almost. Weeks later, the heavy machinery came, not to pour more concrete, but to clear it away. The creek was freed, allowed to run the way it was always meant to. Emma and I stood hand in hand at the bank one morning, watching sunlight turn the water gold. Carl joined us, arms crossed, a rare smile tugging at his face. "Looks like it's breathing again," he said. I nodded. "So are we." The neighborhood still bore scars, muddy lawns, patched fences, stories whispered late into the night. But it was alive, stronger. And as the creek wound freely through Millstone Ridge, I realized something. You can cage water, you can bury it, you can silence it. But one day it always comes back, just like truth. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.